All right, this is the Big Douglas Show. Rapper Big Pooh is in the co-host chair, and our guest today, the owner of Facebook Game Plan and the czar of the playbook, Emery Hunt, is our guest today. Emery, how are you?
I'm doing fine. It's football game plan. I ain't trying to get sued by Facebook.
Oh, oh man, I'm sorry. I thought I nailed the intro and blew it. I had one job today to nail the intro. I would do better.
That's all good. I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited. Emery, I'm curious, when do y'all get, well, first, before we do this, earlier today, Alex Smith retired. I thought we should just acknowledge that. I don't do this very often. I got injured 10 years ago and I'm a C6 quadriplegic. And what Alex Smith was able to do is just incredible. And I hope he finds the same happiness off the field that he found on it, because I know he enjoyed playing the game. And if indeed he was able to go out on his own terms, then good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you can go out, get the bag and run and get the trophy too, you got comeback player of the year. You can't argue with that, man. That's writing your own story. That's a great way to end a career that saw its fair share of ups and downs and redemption. He had all kind of peaks and valleys in his story. So definitely one that should be told.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Emery. I think that him retiring today or before this next season was perfect. He got to come back, work his way back, play the game he loved. He said he loved, and show he could still play it, but walk away and have that time with his family and not, further, potentially, do any damage to himself. So I think it was good that he, I think he was good for the game. All the young quarterbacks he's mentored speak very highly of him. How he, even though he was the number one pick, was supposed to be the guy, he still had no problem mentoring others as they constantly took his job. But he did it with pride, and I hope the best for him and whatever he decides to do from here on out.
Well, and Pooh, you're right. People will forget he had like a twofold redemption story, right? Because he was a first round bust until Harbaugh basically gets to San Francisco, and then of course from the leg injury. Emery, as we move kind of towards the draft and college football and the players, how early do you start the process on these kids, on these prospects?
Well, for me, what I do is so unique because we cover football all year round. So during the football season, I'm either broadcasting games. I do a lot of MEAC games, a lot of games at Monmouth, and so I'm doing college football, and I also cover the NFL. So I'm kind of working both ends of it. But I don't start focusing solely on the draft until January, when I go to all of these different All-Star games, and start looking at players and start my evaluations there, and then get back after the Senior Bowl and start pouring over the film, and then after that pump out all my grades and reports prior to the combine, because I don't want anyone to believe or think that my analysis is based on what I just saw someone do in non-football related drills. So I try to get all that work in, about a month and a half of work in film and scouting before the combine, and get all those grades out and ready to go.
Emery, you just said that you cover a lot of MEAC, and I'm went to North Carolina Central myself. Why do you think it's so hard? Obviously, there's a talent difference when you go from big Power 5 football down to FCS or whatever division the MEAC is in, or version of football the MEAC is in. But why do you think it's so difficult for talent from HBCUs in particular to get noticed and make that jump to the NFL, as opposed to a lot of FCS schools like North Dakota State, for instance, or schools such as that?
That's a great question, because I do a lot of Morgan State games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always seeing the tremendous skill talent that they have. And it's like there's a guy right now that plays for the Jets in Menashe Bailey, who was outstanding at Morgan State. Then we saw, a few years ago, they had an offensive lineman who was outstanding at Morgan State, got to go to the East-West Shrine game, and then ended up getting drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. But I think what happens with a lot of programs in HBCU is just the numbers. when you look at where they are going to be on equal plane with a lot of the FBS Power 5 schools, it's the skill positions. But now you throw a Menashe Bailey who's 6'1", 205, runs 4.3. You throw him in the mix with 17 other guys that are 6'1", 205, run 4.3, and so it's kind of like that where they have a lot of talent. There's also a lot of talent at that position. Now, if they're starting to cultivate and develop O linemen or D linemen, like we saw Rodney Gunter a few years ago at Delaware State get drafted by the Cardinals as well, because there's not a lot of good athletic talent at that position. So if it's going to be interesting to see if they can, because we saw Tennessee State have a lot of success in this with the last 4 to 5, maybe even 6 draft classes. For whatever reason, they've been able to put O linemen in the NFL, whether drafted or undrafted. So if you're able to develop talent, cultivate talent, develop talent at certain positions where they're not plentiful, you have a great chance to get guys into the league. But right now, if you have good quarterbacks, good running backs, good receivers, you kind of fall in line where there's a bunch of those guys. So it'll be interesting to see how, guys like Deion Sanders or even Eddie George, or when you look at a Tyrone Wheatley, what he's been able to do at Morgan State so far, or even just some of these guys like Dawson Odoms down at Southern, who has been able to develop some really good talent. You look at North Carolina A&T, Coach Sam Washington developing talent on the defensive line to where he has, a Darryl, I believe Washington, Darryl Williams getting drafted by Buffalo. So if you're able to develop and cultivate that talent at different positions that don't have an abundance of talent that people have to scrape off the top with, then you're going to see a bunch more HBCU guys jump into the league.
To follow up, you mentioned them. I want to get your intake on how do you believe Deion is doing in his first year at Jackson State? And make no mistake, I know I'm willing to give him the same leeway we ask of other coaches where they come in. You can't turn the program around in one season. Obviously, you need time to implement your plan, get your guys in, etc. But how do you think he's shaking out over at Jackson State so far?
Considering what he had to work with, I think he's done a great job, because we forget we're still in the global pandemic, and he got started late. This spring season is new, so he got there in December, had to go through the whole recruiting and signing period. Then you have to turn around a couple weeks after the Christmas holidays and start practicing to start playing in February. So you got maybe 2.5 weeks of getting a team ready to play amidst all of the stops and starts with COVID and things like that. So the fact that they won 3 games, to me, that's a success, because now you get to see a full off season, a full implementation of his system, full implementation of the recruits that are going to come in. Guys understand how he coaches and what the staff expects of him. So I think he's done a great job in that respect. And so, I know the other coaches in the SWAC and other coaches around HBCU football kind of, everybody wants to beat Deion, and I understand that just because of who Deion is. But Deion also is, if you're not playing, it's because of Deion that Alabama A&M is playing on ESPN and ESPN2 and not ESPN, Brazil. So that's the thing when you think about the Deion Sanders. Yeah, he has a spotlight, but it's your time to shine too. Think about if you're Ezra Gray, this outstanding tailback for Alabama State. No one is talking about him if they don't beat Jackson State on ESPN. Everybody's talking about Ezra Gray. Everybody's talking about a Quill Glass, a quarterback for Alabama A&M. No one's talking about that if he didn't go off against Jackson State, which everybody watched on ESPN. So I think he's done a great job. And I think because of what he is and what they have done in conjunction with them bringing in FAMU and Bethune into the SWAC, the fall is going to be outstanding for HBCU football in both the MEAC and the SWAC, to be quite honest.
What does Deion or the Eddie Georges of the world have to do to convince 5-star talent to come? Because really, I mean, we live in a world where the NFL continues to tell us, listen, if you play well, we'll find you because there's tape on everybody. And is it merely getting more games on the ESPN? Is that what it will take to convince some of these 5 stars? Because that's really where you get the difference, right?
Right. And I think there's a couple ways to go about it. If I'm Eddie George, I walk in there, first Eddie George is like the biggest dude you've ever gonna see. And he just gets bigger the more time he's sitting there. Like, he just keeps getting bigger. And so if I'm him, I'm walking in there with my Ohio State helmet, my Tennessee Titans helmet, the cover of Madden 2020, 2001. You know, if I'm Deion, I'm walking there with those 95 Deion sneakers on. You know, because I'm still Deion Sanders, I'm still Eddie George. I can get you to the league. And it's a good point you brought up about TV, because we all remember back in the day when, you know, growing up, you only saw maybe 6 schools on TV, right? You had the wherever you are on the East Coast. I grew up in New Orleans, so you had we got to see Florida, Florida State. You got to see Notre Dame, and then the evening you got to see whatever WAC game was on out west, like San Diego State, because Falk was playing at the time, San Diego State or BYU and or Hawaii, and that was it. But now everybody's on TV, so you really don't have that card to play, but you do have a card to play to say, hey, we're playing on TV as well. I know we can get you a higher profile game because of who I am as a coach, and also I know how to get you to the league, because this is not just someone that played in the league, because there's many coaches that are coaching at the Power 5 level or FBS level that have played in the NFL. These are legit greats that have played in the NFL. These are guys that you look up to. I remember I fanboyed out when I was getting recruited in high school, and I got a call from Indiana University, and Anthony Thompson was the guy that was recruiting me. And I'm like, man, I got your football card. You know, I'm geeking out, right? So I can only imagine if Deion Sanders called or Eddie George called and are sitting in your house, in your living room, and it's, you know, that hits different than, you know, a guy that, you know, was on special teams in the league, you know, saying, hey, I played in the NFL. Yeah, that's great, but this is a legend. This is great, a great player. That to me has a ridiculous effect on what you do as a impressionable 17 or 18-year-old.
I want to turn our attention to the draft, and we always start off with the quarterbacks. It's always the big to do. And I'm seeing, you know, I was seeing Mac Jones for a long time mock to San Francisco. I woke up today, looked real quick, and now I see Justin Fields is mocked to San Francisco. What is going on with these quarterbacks after Trevor Lawrence?
In fact, real quick, I looked this up before we started. So I'm glad you said this. It now is Fields minus 110, Jones plus 175, and Lance at plus 200 to go 3.
Oh my goodness.
And we did this Friday, Pooh, right? And it was definitely Mac Jones
right
on Friday.
First of all, like, how are we just gonna let Zach Wilson just slide through at number 2? You know what I'm saying? Like, how would he just go unaccosted at number 2? But to me, it has always been Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, right? And I think the way we see stuff shake out in the media, people get bored with certain storylines. Like, they love the Trevor Lawrence storyline, so they're going to hype him up and make him go from Trevor Lawrence, a good quarterback at Clemson, to Trevor Lawrence / Elway, Luck, you know, all these great, they're going to compare him to every great, right? And so obviously he's going to be untouchable. So we got to find somebody else to talk about. And we can't hype up Justin Fields because we talked about the same 2 people the whole spring, summer, and in the fall. We got to find a new character to talk about. And that's where you get Zach Wilson. And then with Mac Jones playing the way he did, well, you know, he just won a championship, and, you know, he had all these great stats. We got to bring him in the mix as well, even though nothing really has changed for either quarterback. If you thought Fields was the number 2 quarterback, you thought it was 1A, 1B going into the season, nothing Fields did on the field changed that perception. And if you look at Mac Jones, if you thought Mac Jones was a 3rd-round talent based off what he did last year when he had to fill in for Tua, nothing really changed in his skill set to warrant him going from a 3rd round to number 1 overall. He just played on the team for a full season, and they won the championship. Zach Wilson, I can understand the rise because he didn't play a lot in 2019 because he was hurt. But he always has that you know, that flair for the spectacular. You know, I compared his game to that of Johnny Manziel, right? Where he did a lot of wild plays on the field, and he had a big game against USC in 2019 where they won. That was an upset. The first exposure I had to him was in 2018 when he went 13-13 in that bowl game. I think it was the New Mexico Bowl, where he was on fire. He stepped in and played really well, but he was hurt. So to me, if I'm investing the number 2 pick in someone that has an injury history, I wouldn't do that. That's why, to me, if I'm the Jets, is Justin Fields. Plus, you look at it from the fact that, even though I have an 85 grade on Justin Fields and a 83 on Zach Wilson, so I don't see them being, there's not that big of a gap. But the reason why I would take Fields in New York is because of that. You're playing in New York. You can't do anything terrible out here and have to deal with that media. I think Justin Fields is more apt to do that because he has to play in the biggest games for 2 years at Ohio State. He had to follow a guy in Dwayne Haskins who was a Heisman finalist, broke Big Ten records, Ohio State records, and NCAA records, a 50 touchdown season. You have to follow that up. And he did. He threw 41 touchdowns, only 2 picks or something his first year, and then followed it up with this season where they beat Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs. So I would probably go Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, Mac Jones, and then Trey Lance. Because Lance, while he has all the tools and he has a talent, I just find it fascinating that, we criticize Dwayne Haskins for his shortcomings in Washington. Well, he didn't have that many starts at Ohio State. He only had 15 starts. Okay, fine, cool. So fast forward just a year and a half, and now we're going to talk about a guy that had 15 starts at an FCS level at the program that barely threw the football. And in his showcase game, he didn't throw the football well. Now we want to put that dude third overall. What are we doing here? So I think I would only take Lance if I'm Atlanta because he could sit for 2 years. Or if I'm a team like Chicago, where you have the luxury of playing behind an Andy Dalton, or if you're Washington, and if he falls that far to where hey, we just had a situation where we had a guy that was inexperienced, but this is our guy. We can, run with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We could run with, the kid Heineke. And then 2 years we could throw in Trey Lance. So I think there are certain spots I would take Trey Lance in the first round. If it's not those 3 spots, I'm not touching him until round 2. Same with Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones is a plug and play type guy, kind of like Kellen Mond. So it depends on a veteran team with a guy that has played some big time ball that I would take a chance on. Not in the first round though.
Just a follow up on Fields real quick. Do you think if he'd have stayed at Georgia and had the same results that he did at Ohio State, would we still be having the conversation about who goes 2 in the draft?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Because people love to take certain quarterbacks and push them down the board for no other reason than being, themselves. There should be no reason why, Mitch Trubisky goes over Deshaun Watson, considering the game we just saw Deshaun Watson play against Alabama, against that Alabama team and that Alabama defense. And we saw Pat Mahomes do great things consistently at Texas Tech. And all of a sudden we saw a guy just catapult those two when he couldn't beat out the dude that was there for 3 years in Marquise Williams, who didn't even get a sniff in the NFL. And we just saw that, we see it every year play out that way. So he could have went to, Georgia. He could have stayed at Georgia and went, undefeated through 65 touchdowns, no interceptions. They would still focus on those 3 incomplete passes that he had against Georgia Tech and use that like they're doing right now with those 7 bad plays he had against Indiana and use that against him to why he should go, in the second round. So yeah, it would have happened.
We bring up Mond and Mills. You mentioned Mond. If I say Mond and Mills, and I'm assuming we're looking in that second round range with them, where do you stand on the difference between Mond and Mills and who you like better there?
There's a highway gap between Kellen Mond and David Mills. I was shocked David Mills came out. When you watch Stanford, and this is a situation where folks are getting enamored with non-football activities. So David Mills during the season when they were actually playing football was atrocious. Davis Mills at his pro day when, it's scripted, he could give a, stern look at the media when he's talking to him, strong handshake, all that good stuff. He's a first round pick. But are we drafting someone that you want to, put in your PR department, or are we drafting a quarterback? Because if that's the position and I need you to complete passes and, avoid sacks and avoid turning the ball over, that's not Davis Mills. Now, for Kellen Mond, he played a lot of football. He played well with Jimbo Fisher, but for me, Kellen Mond is someone that you watch and you just always want to see more. You like, there's something about his game that just doesn't like quickly click. I feel like he plays a bit robotic. It's almost like he's thinking too much out on the field, kind of like how Alex Smith used to be, where you have a super smart dude and they want to make sure they got the right answer before they make the decision. But you guys know as great as anybody, at some point in time, football is a reactionary game. You just got to play. And, for Kellen Mond to go out there and play like he did against LSU 2 years ago, or like he did in the Senior Bowl this past January, that's something that you want. You just hope that he could find that level of, reactionary skill set on a consistent basis. So he's someone that you would probably get frustrated with because he just doesn't play like someone that should be playing loosely, but still better than Davis Mills.
Do you think these football people still get caught up in, even after watching the Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson? Do you think football people still get caught up in this idea of what a quarterback in the NFL should look like as opposed to what they actually see on film?
All the time. I strongly believe that. And I know people will come out vehemently denying it, but it's hard to like, if you just told someone that didn't have a football eye, you just had them watch highlights, right? And say, pick the one that you like the most. And let's talk about the Lamar Jackson draft. Which one would you want on your team? 10 times out of 10, people would pick Lamar Jackson. It's only when people are told what they should look for in a player that they start to knock those guys down. It's always those traditional, stereotypical things that they say that you can't tangibly find on the field. Read defenses or dissect the coverage. Play from the pocket. Like, bro, every time I look up this dude scoring touchdowns, that's the dude I want on my team. You need points to win. But I think it's always the case, which is why you see someone like a Davis Mills who had zero productivity get this talk of being, in the first round conversation or high second round conversation when nothing on film shows you that this guy can play. And it's interesting because you'll see them pick 6 or 7 passes to why he can be great. Juxtaposed to Justin Fields, they'll pick the same 6 or 7 passes and say, well, this is why you can't take him, number 2. Well, yeah, all right, let's play a full season, full game. Well, you got to look at the upside of Davis Mills. He didn't have help. He didn't have weapons. He didn't have this. The economy was bad. We're dealing with COVID. They had all kinds of excuses, right? But with Fields, it's like he better be great right out the gate. I tweeted this out the other day just to see where people love to jump in comments and not realize the question. The NFL throwback account tweeted out Terrell Pryor's highlights, right?
I saw that
from the NFL. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Had he played now, he'd probably have a chance to stick at the quarterback position. And some people are like, oh yeah, but he threw 7 touchdowns and 11 picks. That probably didn't help his case. I was like, I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny how you just leave out the rushing yards he had that year in his first year starting. Now take Josh Allen's rookie stats, passing and rushing, 11 touchdowns or 10 touchdowns, 12 picks, 500 something yards rushing. Wow, that sounds a lot like Terrell Pryor, who only started 9 games as opposed to 16. Imagine if he had the luxury of being told he could be a developmental guy, growth, and especially what you look at what you like for the position, that's something that you want to see continue to grow. Juxtaposed to Josh Allen, who didn't play well his first year, didn't play particularly well his second year. This year he had a great season. And you look at someone that came out this past January, last January, and Tyree Jackson, who played at Buffalo, University of Buffalo. Same like Josh Allen, rocket on, great athleticism, accuracy was hit or miss, but had the tools. He's already playing tight end. He was at the Senior Bowl as a quarterback, and now he's a tight end with the Philadelphia Eagles. So they will always try to, I feel as though that until the people that are involved in the decision making is changed, then you'll start to see it trickle down to what we see on the field. But until that stays consistent, we're going to always have this battle back and forth. It has gone all. I remember, being 13, 12 years old, thinking like, wow, they said Charlie Ward was too short to play quarterback, but he tall enough to play in the NBA. Like, make that make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think we're gonna always deal with this. We just gotta find a way to be consistent on calling it out when it happens.
Emory, people keep trying to convince me on Kyle Trask, and I've seen a bunch of him as a lifelong Georgia fan. I don't see it, and that's not because I'm predetermined to hate on Florida, but I just don't see it. Make him make sense for me in that first, second round area.
If this was 96, 97, he'd be a first round pick, but he's not built for today's game. And that's sad to say, but this is a fast man's game now, and if you can't move, you're dead in the water. And we saw that play out as the season went on. When teams started to put that heat pepper on him, he couldn't really get out the way. And also you look at his placement, it was hit or miss. Yeah, we love Kyle Pitts and love his athleticism and his ability to go in high point the football and all that stuff. But you have to ask yourself, like, why is every pass he had to go jump sky high to go get? They never hit this man in stride, so between him and Trayvon Grimes, the other 6'5" receiver, yeah, you love those tall athletes, but at some point the placement has to be consistent. And I think when you look at someone like Trask, I think he's a good, QB2 at the next level, kind of Matt Schaub-ish. But I don't think he has a strong arm. I just don't think he has the athleticism to be a starter, because you see someone out there that can't really move and doesn't really have the ability to beat you with his arm strength. If he can't move, then you're going to kind of put yourself in a limited situation.
Emory, I'm interested. Do you see a lot of movement happening in the first round of the draft? I know that people will reach for one of these quarterbacks that you feel shouldn't go as high as they're probably going to go. But do you anticipate a lot of movement starting probably at that number 4 spot with Atlanta?
I think so. I think what's going to happen, and we kind of see it every year, we think we're going to have a draft that goes straight forward, but because the contracts are not that expensive, people tend to, all right, we'll take some chances. And especially if you have a team, let's say like Cleveland, right, who has done a good job in free agency and stacking up their roster. So now they're at pick 26. They figure, hey, we got a really good deep roster. And same with Buffalo, really good deep roster with a lot of guys returning. We could take a chance with this, with this draft in this first round and move up to go get a specific guy. And I think we'll see a lot of teams do that. It wouldn't surprise me to even see the Jets take that second first round pick and their high second round pick and go up into the top 10 to get somebody, right? So I think because of how the contracts are set up now, everything is, already slotted for whatever, pick you are. I think that's why we see so much movement. And with 2022 being such a stacked draft with, because of all the guys that came back for their senior season or took advantage of that free year that the NCAA gave them, we're going to see so many talented players in the 2022 draft. So it may be wise for teams to stockpile picks next year. So because of that, we'll see a lot of movement in this year's draft as well.
Washington football team fans are hoping that Parsons will fall. How far of a fall do you see with him? It's hard to imagine him falling.
I think because it all depends on the positional run that goes on. So we know we're going to see a quarterback run in the top 3 or 4 picks, right? Then after that, we're probably going to see an offensive tackle run, because I think that position is deep as well. We may even see a cornerback run early. And with that being the backdrop, those 3 things, you may even see a Parsons be there when Washington picks. And it wouldn't be surprising because teams want to gobble up quarterbacks. They want to gobble up these guys that can guard these fast receivers that they're bringing into the league. People want to get speed on offense, so they're going to gobble up some of these receivers. Parsons may be falling, but not because of a talent thing, but just because of positional, runs that happen in the first round. So yeah, he could probably be there. If he starts to get to a point where, you're looking at Chicago, I think if you're Washington, I don't know when they pick, they pick
19,
after 19, so they're right before Chicago. So they may not even have to move up in a guy. That Denver would be the spot I would worry about for Parsons. Giants could be a spot at 11 to worry about with Parsons. But after that, I think, unless New England New England doesn't draft good players, so you don't have to worry about him. They sign everybody else good players, but I think if he gets past Denver, maybe even or Detroit at 7, if they chose to go, they need a receiver, but if they chose linebacker, I could see that happening. But so I would say Detroit, Denver, the Giants, then I could see him probably getting to Washington.
That's what I was going to ask you, Emory. If you were in the Washington front office, would you advocate for possibly moving up to grab a guy, whoever that guy is, or would you be content with sitting at 19 and seeing kind of how this thing play out in front of you? Because you know somebody's good going to fall to you. They're going to get, suppressed and pushed back to you. So would you advocate for moving up or just be content with where you are?
I would probably be content because if you look at Washington, from my perspective, they can go one of 3 ways. I believe they can go linebacker with Parsons. They can go offensive line with any one of the positions, tackle or guard. They can also go, secondary. They can go cornerback, to stockpile, some good weapons. They can go edge rusher, or if they want to double down on that position again, and just keep adding pass rushers, they can do that. So I think they have a variety of ways they can go. And because offensive line could be a need, whether it's tackle or guard, that's 2 positions right there. Inside backer could be a need. And if Parsons is gone, consolation prize could be someone like Zaven Collins out of Tulsa, who can play inside or outside, and he can cover. He's not a pass rusher, but he can cover. He can, he's a good, instinctive ball player that you want on the second level. So I could see them going a variety of ways, with that pick. I could even see them, taking a running back, if Najee Harris or someone like that. So they're in a good spot because I feel like there's going to be a ton of, players that's going to get pushed down because people are going to, fly up the board to get quarterbacks and wide receivers and some of the top tier offensive tackles, some of the premier names early before you start to see stuff get pushed down to where Washington is.
Where did you have Antonio Gibson coming out last year? What were your thoughts on him?
I had him as a mid-round player. For me, he played the running back position like a receiver played running back. So he just didn't have the natural vision. And you saw that play out with Washington. How many times he, ran in the back of his lineman or, tripped up over his own feet. And while he on paper, you see 6'2", 220, 4'4", good receiver. You see all that on paper, but when you watch him play, he just looks like someone that they stuck at running back and say, hey, play running back because you got some size and you got some speed with you. It's kind of like how David Johnson was. I still think David Johnson plays running back like a receiver playing running back and not the other way around. It just doesn't have a natural feel for it. And I think he's best suited in a tandem type situation. So that's why you kind of saw a guy like Peyton Barber have success when he got his opportunity, because he sees it from a running back's perspective. And I think a lot of what Gibson, and you hope that he can improve on that, but he has played that position, at Memphis. He played it in the NFL, and he just didn't see him, kind of grow in that role. He's better suited, I guess, as a short yardage goal line guy. But I think if Washington was able to add a talent next to him, it could bring out the best in him and help minimize his role and let him maximize his role in certain situations.
I'm interested in, I know this isn't going to happen in the first round because Kyle Pitts is the only tight end that will probably be drafted in the first round, but in the mid to later rounds on the tight ends, I know it's not the sexy position this year in the draft, but what kind of tight end do you see being available for Washington in probably like that 3rd, 4th round, 5th round, maybe after you get past the Pitts, and I think that the kid from Miami, I think he stretches the field. What kind of tight end do you see? Because they are in desperate need of a tight end. Like they have 1 tight end on their roster or 2 right now.
Yeah, I would look at someone like Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. He may be someone that could be there in the 2nd round. And you look at someone later on, if you're looking at a flex tight end and these guys that can really get down the field, I kind of like Jacob Peterson out of UL Monroe, whose dad is Josh Peterson,
Mhm.
the former Eagles coach. And, UL Monroe had all sorts of COVID issues this past season. Their defensive coordinator retired in the week 2 of the season, and so they had all kind of issues. So the numbers weren't what they were last year. But you go back and watch last year's tape, and you watch him just completely work himself open on a consistent basis. You see him getting down the field, vertical, being able to go up at his highest point. So I think he has a good receiving skills that you want to run next to someone like Logan Thomas, and is a much more natural at that position than Logan Thomas, who former quarterback, still playing tight end. Although he did well last year, you get someone that can be a legit vertical threat. I think that's perfect. Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame is a good H-back. I think he's going to be outstanding. His upside, I believe, is through the roof because he's athletic, he's explosive. He takes pride in what he does as a blocker, but even with the ball in his hands, he's kind of like Jordan Reed in that regard. He has wiggle. He has the ability to score the ball. He can run through, arm tackles. I think that's someone that's going to end up being a better pro than he was in college because he's going to get utilized a lot more than he was at Notre Dame.
Glad you said that. I'm a big Tommy Tremble fan, Notre Dame fan. I was waiting. I said, please say Tommy Tremble, please, please.
I don't expect him to be in the 3rd round. That's why I was like, man, if GMs are doing what they're supposed to do, this dude should be, going in the 2nd round. But if he's there in the 3rd, I would literally drive down to DC and throw the card in there for him, because Tremble is outstanding.
No, I definitely agree. He's a willful blocker. And he was definitely underutilized because they had that other kid they called Baby Gronk, Mayer or something they call him. But so he definitely wasn't utilized as a route runner as much as he looks like he has the potential to be. So absolutely.
The other player from Notre Dame that I know gets Washington fans in a frenzy is the kid with JOK. I will not attempt to pronounce it, but where do you see his natural fit in the NFL?
Defense. How about that, right? Because I think he's a outside linebacker, weak side linebacker, but I may be looking at it from a traditional positional perspective. And I know some people see him at strong safety. I don't think he wants that stress trouble. Put that dude out there on the island against these NFL legit receivers that can get open. You don't want to do that, but you want him playing close to the line of scrimmage because of his speed. Now he can go out there and match up against tight ends and some bigger, slower wide receivers. So I get the appeal, but I see him more as an outside linebacker, weak side backer. That can be your nickel backer in sub packages, which we know is all the rave right now because offenses are in standard 3-by-1 personnel group and 3 receivers, 1 tight end. So he fits today's game. He's athletic. He's consistent. And I can understand the appeal. That's someone else that could be a target for Washington in the 1st round because you don't teach that level of speed and explosiveness, but he also has good football skill set. He plays out in the space better than some guys that are out in the space primarily by their position. But I don't think in the NFL where everything is enhanced, you want him out there consistently because he can get exposed. But I do see him as a very good weak side backer, almost like a matchup piece on defense.
Emory, I'm interested. What would you do? Not cut, not waive, not trade, but what would you do with Landon Collins when he comes back?
It sounds like he's the player that you just described with JOK though.
What would you do with him?
It's unfortunate because I cover the Giants and I've seen a lot of Landon Collins out here, and I liked how they utilized him. I want to say his 2nd year, but in that scope, they had Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie playing kind of a hybrid role where he was kind of playing safety and corner, but they allowed Landon Collins to move around, which then allowed him to have his best season, make the Pro Bowl with the Giants. And so I think you kind of want him to move around. He already let it be known he's not trying to play nickel linebacker, but you got to, pull him to the side like, bro, you kind of is already, you know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of moving you around anyway. But I think you got to really, dress it up nice for him to understand that this is what you could play while you add another safety back there and you have him playing almost like a rover. But you kind of essentially could have him play nickel linebacker, just kind of change how you say it instead of saying, hey man, it's $15, it's $14.99. kind of deal with
So,
Landon Collins.
well,
No, you're safety. He's going to play primarily near the line of scrimmage, but he's still a
Exactly.
safety.
You're safe.
They-
Yeah, absolutely.
they didn't address it nice because when Rivera asked this week, I don't know if you saw this or not, but they asked him about Landon saying he wouldn't move to a linebacker, and was that like a joint decision? And he said Landon does not speak for the organization when he says that. So Rivera made it known that he'll play where he's told, I suppose. But to your point, with the Sam linebacker all but extinct now, that the Viper, dime, money, whatever you want to call it, I mean, three safeties are on the field almost all the time now, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing: everything is cyclical. I remember when everybody wanted Ted Washington and Big Norman Hand on the inside, right? These big D linemen, Grady Jackson and those guys. Then everybody went spread. Like, man, we can't have these two big dudes on the middle, so we got to get these smaller DNs that could get out there and rush. Then everybody go back to 3 tight end sets. Now we have these small dudes out there, and we can't stop the run. So no matter who you have out there on the field, teams will adjust. So if you want to, put 3 safeties out there, cool. We just gonna line up and run the football, and we're gonna expect those safeties to get off these blocks from these tackle eligible guys that we have in there, and see how much they want to do that. You got these skinny edge rushers out there. Can they stop the run? We're gonna take away their biggest strength and use it as a weakness. We're gonna make them be run defenders as opposed to pass rushers. So it all depends on. That's why you want guys out there that can do a lot of good things on both ends of defense. Because if you try to play the matchup game, teams gonna always have a way to out match up you, especially if they have the personnel.
Emory, I'm not going to take a tour around the NFC East this week. I promise I'm not. But I heard you said you covered the Giants, and I want to know what do you think of whatever direction they're going in, and then Daniel Jones just as a prospect or a quarterback in the NFL? Because I know when he came out, that was the debate. Like, should he go as high as he did, or was he better than Haskins and whoever else came after him? But what do you see of Daniel Jones in the direction the Giants are going?
And I had Haskins rated high, and I had him over Daniel Jones. And so I'm still going to stand on that. Like, talent wise, you don't take Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. But let's say for the same thing we talked about with Justin Fields versus Zach Wilson playing here, I kind of feel like it worked out for the Giants because Daniel Jones has the right temperament for this media market, so it kind of worked for him. He's working for the Giants in that regard. But on the field, as much as people love to rag on Washington saying, oh, they chose, that's why the Giants chose him instead of Haskins. Like, I mean, Jones threw 10 touchdown passes last year and played in every game. Like, what are we talking about? Haskins threw 7. Like, it's not like Jones, out there lighting it up. And he also has 39 turnovers in every game, all the games he's played in. So what actually are we doing? So I think Jones is in a pivotal season because everything around him has gotten better. Their defense carried them last year. The offensive line got better. Granted, he didn't play without Saquon Barkley, so he's going to get Saquon Barkley back. They added receivers on the outside. They added Kyle Rudolph to kind of help push Evan Ingram into more of a wide receiver flex role to where he's going to be able to work one-on-one and get himself open. So Daniel Jones has a lot going for him going into this season. So it really is all on him. Can he stop turning the ball over? He went 7 weeks or 6 or 7 weeks last year straight where he didn't have a touchdown pass. Like, that's not what you draft someone 6th overall for. And so with all of the things that they've added, if they get to the playoffs, is it really because of Daniel Jones? Or is it because of the defense and him not, turning the ball over and just handing it off to, Saquon Barkley? So I feel as though he has to take a huge leap this year in ball security and throwing the football with consistency. I like how last year they started to utilize his athleticism because that helped neutralize things. Now you have to combine that when you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield because it could make the offense kind of go. Because they were trying to make this guy be Eli Manning, but you're wasting his athleticism in doing so. So we'll see this year if he can take that jump. Because if not, people talk about, if Lance falls or if Fields falls, like, and Giants fans making fun of all the other teams in the division. It's like, listen, if we're gonna keep it a buck, if a quarterback falls and he's there at 11, y'all be stupid not to take him because, I mean, let's be honest, you know, you can improve over Daniel Jones. He's not there yet. So I just think they have a low bar for him because of how much he was ridiculed at the draft when he made the pick. So anything that he does that's semi-competent, there was a picture from training camp last year. We were at the scrimmage, and so many other the beat writers tweeted it out. It's like, you know, it was a still shot. It was like, this shows you the growth that Daniel Jones has made so far already early on in camp. And it was him breaking the huddle. I was like, yo, what bar are we setting? You know, like, are we serious? Like this, he just broke the huddle. And he was like, this is the leadership that you want to see from. I'm like, my God, like we are literally, you know, got pandemic brain. And so I just think that he has to do something on the field to warrant that, you know, or we're going to see the Giants in 2022 address the quarterback position.
Were you surprised they gave Leonard Williams that big ass contract?
Not surprised at all, because Leonard Williams actually earned it, man. And I remember I was doing this show in it was in Manhattan. It was at this place called Rock and Riley's. It was draft night, and it was with the Fantasy Sports Network. So they had a show inside this restaurant, and on the balcony, the NFL had a party, like a draft party. So as some players are walking in and out, we're grabbing guys, bringing them on the show. So we grabbed Leonard Williams. This is when they took, I believe, Saquon Barkley. It was a Saquon Barkley year. And so we grabbed Leonard Williams. He's with the Jets. And I was like, you know, obviously, you know, people look at you as a 5 tech because you're doing, that's what they have you playing in that defense. And is, you know, so people think you can't rush the passer, even though you did it at USC. He was like, I said, so what position would you ideally want to play up front? And he let it be known then. It's like, I'm a 3 tech all day. If they let me be a 3 tech, I'll be able to get sacks. And, you know, we, you know, talk about that, blah, blah, blah. And so he goes to the Giants, and they allow him to play more inside, and he gets these sacks that, you know, was evading him with the Jets. So I think he went out there and proved that he can do it, which is why the Giants, I think, are probably going to take a DN or edge rusher at 11 and try to keep him in that role where he can continue to rush the passer and be disruptive up front, because Dexter Lawrence is a big guy that can also, in his own way, affect the pocket. Leonard Williams can get pressure. If they have someone that really got juice coming off the edge, then their defensive line would be tremendous.
Well, we don't appreciate it because now we gotta pay up for Jonathan Allen now. Now that the bar's been set.
That's what I was going to ask him, Doug. We asked this question last week, but if it was your choice, who do you pay and who do you let go on that Washington front 4? Well, I'll just say 3 because we know Chase Young, he's going into his second year. But between Jonathan, Allen, Deron Payne, well, just them two, they did the tackles. Who do you pay out of them two? Because I don't believe they're going to be able to keep all 4 of them guys on that front 4 for too much longer together.
Yeah, and my answer is kind of tied to how much they like and how much they see growth in Tim Settle, who can play himself. You know,
But they love Tim Settle.
Yeah, so if Settle, who has some quickness and also is a big stout guy, it's like, all right, what can we who has a better upside? So I would say I would pay Payne and let Allen go.
Interesting.
That's my choice. That's always been my choice. The team, from my understanding, thinks Jonathan Allen is, you know, the most important player on the team, basically loves John Allen. So I'd be surprised if it doesn't be that, but I'm with you. I think Payne's got the most upside.
I think I think what they like about Allen, you know, he's a good player, really good player, don't get me wrong, but he's also an extension of the coaching staff in terms of being vocal. So
That's right.
They like that. And so, you know, that's what I'm gonna say about that.
I believe they have that in Chase Young now. So
yeah, exactly.
Emory, we thank you for coming on with us today, taking your time, you know, to be with us, and we really appreciate your insight. Let the people know what you have coming up next and where they can find you.
I appreciate you guys having me on, allowing me being open and just honest and just talking ball. They can follow me on Twitter at FBall Game Plan. They could pick up the copy of my 2021 NFL draft guide. They can find it at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide. And I wanted to show you guys, I printed my copy out. This is what it looks like. So
Ooh,
Yeah, I was going to ask you how long it takes to put that thing together, because I saw it today. It's huge.
yeah, it's all scout reports. So this is individual scout reports for everybody. So we got over 580 individual scout reports. So you're looking at over 700 pages there, 600 something pages. And it takes me about 2 weeks to put it out, because as I'm watching film, I'm inputting my notes on each player, and I watch position for one position first and move on to another position. So I'm able to get that done in no time, because that's just how I process and work. But yeah, you can find this at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide. And not only, again, the fact that there's almost 600 players profiled in here, scouted in individual pages, it not only covers you for whoever gets drafted, but it also covers you through, training camp and preseason. As we know, NFL rosters are transient, so you're going to see a lot of turnover on the back end of the roster. And when your team signs a Menashe Bailey, and you're like, well, who the hell is Menashe Bailey? You thumb through this guy, like you see a scout report on Menashe Bailey, and you're like, oh, well, that's what he can do. And that's how he fits in. So that's why we give guys this amount, because we know it's not just about the draft. It's about the undrafted players. It's about the free agents. And it's about those players that we're going to see, end up making the team and making an impact on a roster in the regular season. So when Cameron Curl is balling and no one knows who Cameron Curl is, you go to the scouting guide from last year and see a good scouting report on Cameron Curl and how we had him highly graded, and he's out there making an impactful play. So it's a really good draft guide. This is my second year putting it on paper, because usually I was just doing it in video form. So we're excited about it, and it's a good piece to have. I printed mine out because I got to carry it with me when I go cover the draft in Cleveland. But you don't have to, take out tuition to pay for this printed out form. But you can thumb through it on your iPad or whatever. And again, it's at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide.
excellent. I'm gonna have to go get my copy, because I that's something that I'm going to Google, like, who's this guy? Where did this guy come from? So definitely appreciate you doing that. But once again, thank you, Emory, and have a good day, and good luck next week for draft week.
Hey man, appreciate you having me on. Always a big fan of your music too, by the way. Man.
Thank
I
you,
ain't gonna lie, I had to fan out for a bit, like you know what I'm saying. So I want to let you know that while the people are listening. Big fan,
thank you,
so,
thank you, much appreciated.
Had to let you know that, man. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, have
Thanks,
a good
Emory.
one.
Appreciate you.